Welcome everyone to another CTC software webinar. My name is Sean Zerbis, the Director of BIM Development here at CTC Software, and today we're going to be continuing with the CTC Analytics Learning Series. Focusing today on efficiently managing the projects and project model logs and projects themselves in the portal. That's the whole focus of today. So as always, of course, our webinars are recorded. For those of you watching this on YouTube, we do hope that this series earns us a subscription from you. For those of you participating with us live, we want to remind you that we do always keep an eye on that questions window. So if you have questions about today's topic or the parts of this series that we've already covered, feel free to throw them in the questions window, and if relevant, I'll try to answer them live. And if not, we save a huge QA session for the end so that we can answer anything that we weren't able to answer in the live part. Without further ado, let's jump right into today's conversation here. So really, in our modern culture and the way that we live right now, data is incredibly important. In fact, you could go as far as to say data is king, right? And really, having the ability to leverage that data to make really wise data-driven decisions can help us be much more empowered and help us be much more productive and direct kind of everything that we're doing, all of our efforts, our time spend, our financial spend, whatever, in appropriate directions, right? That's the whole point of data, is to give us real information instead of just making emotional decisions only and not really making data-based decisions. So we're going to build today on our previous discussion. The last session, we talked about project activity logging and configuring that so you're able to start getting some project model-based data out of Revit. And what we're going to do today is talk about how to organize those project model logs, those sessions, into efficient buckets, into logical projects that we can use. Depending on how far you went last time, 2 weeks ago in this case, from that particular presentation, you will have probably some data and you'll be able to follow along with me today as we start to manage these logical project buckets. Now, our goal today is to show you two different major methods that you can leverage, both a manual method and an automated, semi-automated method, to be able to actually organize your projects effectively. And the goal is that we're going to help optimize your model organization, your data gather, and then as we continue further on in this discussion, you'll be able to leverage those buckets for project data as well as all kinds of other data and use this in interesting ways within your firm to help you understand more about the health of your project models or the health of your content library, the health of your standards environment, how you're leveraging CTC tools, and so on. So today, we're going to be talking about 4 specific topics: understanding really why we should be doing some kind of project model organization. I'm going to demonstrate the simple and what we'll call manual project creation and management methodology. It's actually the way that I currently prefer to do it, but depending on your load of projects, you may want to leverage the next method, which is a sort of semi-automatic or automatic style of project creation and project model management. And then finally, we're going to verify that model association. The thing we want to do is make sure that we're getting what we're expecting. And while I may not be able to leverage the current stock dashboards today immediately to show this, I'll show you where you can get this. And then we're also going to take a look at kind of in future sessions, a much more deep view at those dashboards that we will be able to validate at that time in that area after you've done the steps from today's session or this session. So let's just quickly recap where we are in the series roadmap. So we're going to be talking about, or we've already technically talked about, installing and configuring the project activity logger, or PAL. The project and model management, we're going to be doing a deep dive into dashboards, the actual portal-based dashboards, the stock ones. We're going to talk about the reporting API so you can start getting real deep in this. And then we're going to go into a sub-multi-part series of working a lot with that web API to build your own custom Power BI reports, harvesting tons of JSON data, using that JSON data to write to SQL, and then automating the refresh data from SQL as well. So you're getting the latest and greatest stuff. And we've already talked so far in this series about installing and configuring PAL. That was the last session. It's already up on the YouTubes, so you can go back and check that out. Today, in this session, we're talking about the project and project model management within the portal. So we're not really going to be digging into Revit at all. We're going to be talking about the data that we've already begun to collect from that previous session. So what I want to start with is kind of why. Why do we want to manage project models in the first place? Why not just get the data and view it and call it good? Like, do we really need to spend our time doing the steps that we're going to do today? The short answer is we really don't have to, but there is some good benefits of actually managing the data. What happens is if you don't manage the project sessions, any unmanaged project model paths go into a blank project in the portal and in the data reporting system and in the API that we'll talk about in the future. It just goes into this blank, unmanaged, large bulk project. Now, if you're like me and you only have 1 or 2 project models that are really touched every couple of days because I'm not doing production all the time, unmanaged paths is totally fine. But if you're like most of my customers where you have multiple users accessing multiple project models from multiple different projects daily and weekly and certainly monthly, that can get out of control really quick. And the real problem is trying to find information for a specific model when it's not organized into a logical project. That can be really frustrating in the portal, at least. It also can be frustrating in localized systems as well, but really in the portal, it can be a bit of a pain. And viewing project information kind of overall at a glance really isn't very easy without this organization. And so we're going to be talking about how to do this organization. Now, again, you don't 100% have to do this. It's just recommended for these buckets to be cleaner. There's also some other things you can do with this organization, which is, and I didn't write it in the PowerPoint, but you can control which of your team can interact with the reporting for which projects. You can actually limit visibility to certain projects or limit management level access for certain projects via the steps that we're going to be taking today as well. So if you care about the data security of your projects, that could be an important reason to manage it as well and not just leaving it in a big blank bucket, okay? So let's go through the exercise for how do we manually create projects from the portal. So first thing is you got to get signed into the portal, right? So you can get there by going to ctcsoftware.com/portal, and that will get you there. You can also just navigate to the little person and sign in. Either way, it's going to force you to sign in if you haven't recently. And you will have to have some level of project admin or organization admin privileges to be able to do major management in the area that we're about to go to. Now, once you're signed into the portal, you're going to navigate to projects on the main portal nav bar. I'm going to be doing this in a minute so you can follow along. And then to create a brand new project, within that project's navigation, there's a little plus sign on the top right, and you can use that to create a brand new project. And then within that, when you're creating it, there's going to be some mandatory fields, most notably project number and project name. Those are the only 2 mandatory fields you have to fill out to be able to go to the next step, and that you have to do to basically create a project bucket. And so we're going to go through that exercise right now together. So I happen to have the portal already open, and I happen to be on the dashboard because that's where I was just playing around last. So I've already signed in. I navigated to the portal, I clicked on the little person, or I went to ctcsoftware.com/portal and I signed in. And once here, by default, you'll always be on the dashboard. And what I was mentioning is that you want to go to the projects nav area here on the sub nav bar, which is this guy right here. So this is the portal navigation bar, and right there is projects. Now, many of you probably have already been here a little bit because we had to go here to get to the settings to get to the config file that we set up last time in the previous session. So once we have this config file and we've deployed it to all of our current sessions, what's going to happen is Hive PAL specifically will start doing data logging at that point. Until it has that config file, no data logging has happened. So once you deploy that, data logging can happen, and that's what we talked about in our last session. But now that we have some data, we're going to be here. When you navigate to projects, it defaults you to the projects sub drawer here on the left-hand side. So we're in the projects, and you can see I've already got a few projects. Yours may very well be blank. You may have nothing here, and that's okay. We're going to start from scratch and kind of talk about, well, I'm not starting from scratch because I have some projects, but you might be starting from scratch, and that's perfectly fine. So I was talking about that plus sign. That's over here. You'll see this as a continuing theme when you're on users and groups, when you're on the CMS area to make new libraries or new tags, when you're in standards to make new standards. You see that little plus sign there. That's consistent here. So with the projects, we're going to hit the little plus sign right there, and that is going to allow us the ability to create a brand new project. So it's going to bring up a little wizard, create project, step 1 here, and there's some mandatory fields. Notice a little star right there, a little asterisk. Those are the only 2 mandatory fields. So I'm going to create a brand new project right now, and I'm going to name my project today 2024-01, -02, not dash, what am I doing? 02-21-1. Okay. My project numbers tend to be very date-based, and how many projects I start on that day indicates my second number. You have a different numbering schema, that's fine. Just put in whatever the project numbers are that you need. So in my case, I'm putting in a project number, and I'm putting in a project name. So this is going to be, I don't know, new office complex X, doesn't matter, whatever. If I could spell, that would be glorious as well. Complex X, yeah, that works. And you can give it different names, client names, which office in your company is doing the project, name of a building if there's a specific sub-building you're dealing with here, the address if you care, state and province if you care. These are not mandatory. Issue dates if you want to track future issues that are up and coming. So you do not need to fill all these out. All you need is the project number and project name. Those are the 2 critical ones that you have to put in. And ultimately, that's what most of us do put in. You can track more if you want, again, like I said. So in my case, I'm going to go ahead and hit create, and that's going to build me the new project. And it's going to pop back up with the edit project dialog and let me go to the next step of adding paths. Now, you could always go back to the first step here if you needed to, and you could update some information if you want. But in the add paths area here, this is where you can associate project paths for project models that relate to this project collection. I'm going to make a recommendation. Don't add paths manually from here. Just don't. Trust me. We'll do a different way in a minute here. This is actually, I find, more troublesome than doing it the second way that I'm going to show you in a moment. Here, if you cared, if you needed to give access to specific people, you can add permissions as well to this project. You can either add groups of people, which is the preferred way to add these permissions. So I could say, hey, everyone in my company has a viewer level role. So when they sign into the portal, they can view this project and do something with it. If I had a team of project managers, maybe I would want to have, project managers here. Maybe I would want the project managers to be a manager level role. So I could add these 2 users. Right now they're both listed as viewers, but if I wanted my project managers, that's not what I wanted. Let's take and remove those guys and put project managers in here as a manager level add. There we go. So I've got everyone as a viewer, and then anybody in the project managers group is a manager. And what that means is that they can make changes to the project information, and they can do some path allocation as needed. So that's really all that means. These 2 steps, though, here are technically unnecessary. You don't have to do these. You just have to create a project name and a project number here from the portal, and that's it. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and update that. I've got this project set up, and in the future, when the dashboard refreshes, which refreshes approximately once an hour, then it recaches all of the data from the entire backend portal system, including the CMS data, project data, user and group data. All of that information refreshes, refactors, and is available on the dashboard at about an hour fidelity. Okay. So I have a new project in my list. If I was to sort my project number here in reverse order, just switch this, there is that new project for the new Office Complex X, right? And it talks a little bit about the highest level of access, or at least my level of access to this project. I'm a manager owner because I'm signed in as myself with God level rights across the entire portal system. So that's why I can see everything. All right, so we've made a project. Let's jump back to the PowerPoint and talk about the next major step, which is how do we associate project models their paths with their associated project. How do we go about doing that? So for this path association, the manual method, and the one that I find honestly to be right now the most efficient, is we're going to navigate in that left submenu. We're going to navigate to paths and to unmapped on that side menu. And then once we do that, we can see all of the paths that we so far have captured from the PAL system that is currently unallocated to any project. It's just in the sort of blank group, the just general bucket. We can use search filtering within that project path area and find the, any projects that match any of the recent projects that were created, and we can then check and associate those with an appropriate project. So we can use the check all feature or check some feature, whatever, and then we can link those to a portal created logical project using the little links icon that we'll get to next. So I'm going to be associating not to the project that I just made, because I have a project that I've already got and I have some new paths that I know that I want to associate. But regardless, whether it's a new project or an existing project that you've created in the portal, this association is the same. So I'm going to show you the project that I've already got that I want to continue to work with here. It's actually my third project right here, my MEP 2020 project. I have some new paths that I've been working with that associate to this project for this particular project number, my 2014-0518 project. And so I'm going to edit this project and look here once again at the add paths. You'll notice there's a lot of paths already here. There's a few of them that are already in this list. I did not manually add these paths using add and typing in some kind of a path. I didn't do that. You can, but I didn't. So I'm going to close this out. What I did instead is I navigated to the left-hand side, the subdrawer here of paths, and I went to the unmapped paths. This unmapped paths area here lists out all of the project model paths that have been discovered that the PAL tool has logged into the system. This means the portal knows about these paths. It knows that there's project model data associated to them. If you associate these to a logical project, you really can't screw it up because it's all ready to go. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to search for something that matches a part of the path or model names that I understand, that I know. So 20.1.2 is actually some of those paths that I know exist. And you'll notice here that I've got a demo folder locally, and I have a work folder technically locally as well. So there's kind of two major subpaths here. And some of these I want to associate. So I'm just going to hit the little check all option here. In fact, I'm going to show all 25 available options. There's actually only 14 options, but there's quite a few paths here. There's a MPP, MEP, EPP. There's a bunch of paths that I want to associate to that logical project that are not currently associated. There's about twice as many here as there were in the project before. And so I'm simply going to hit this little check all button right here. And you'll notice what happens when you check something is a little links icon shows up to link that file path to a logical project. Well, I'm going to grab all of these and I'm going to remove the ones that are these sort of temp paths that are really not a part of what I want my project to be. So I'm going to remove these intentionally and just keep the rest of these paths where there's been some production level work done to those projects in the recent past at some point. I'm going to hit the link file paths to project, and what it's going to let me do is choose by project name and number a project that I want this associated to. And it's this one right here, the MEP 2020-2014-0518-1 project that we were just taking a look at. So I'm going to be associating it to that project, and I'm going to hit link. Now, this is not going to be instantaneous again on the dashboard, but once this dialog finishes, I'm going to let this think for a minute, see how it's spinning up here. It's going through the database records right now, and it's making the changes on the main backend and associating the projects and the instances and all of that to the actual project. And however many records you have, it might take longer for yours to refresh than for mine, or it might take less time for yours to refresh. That's okay. It doesn't really matter as long as it does. So let's take a look at verifying that it did what I expected it to do. So if I go back here to projects, or just go to the top of the sub-nav menu here of projects, I can jump into the MEP 2020 project that I was just mapping stuff to, edit that, and I can take a look at the paths. And as I scroll down now, this list is significantly longer than it was before, because all of those previously orphaned paths are now associated directly to this project. And that's great. I didn't have to invent or fabricate any of these paths. The system already knew about them because I had models that were opened from those paths. And that just saves me a lot of headache. All right. So I'm going to close this out. And now, once we've done that, we're going to take a look at another way. I just talked about how to manually create projects using the plus sign here, and then going to paths and unmapped to map the paths. That's a great way to do that, right? I think that's one of the better ways to do it. But there's another way. If you have a lot of projects to work with, you probably don't want to make them one by one, hitting the plus sign, typing in a project number, typing in a project name, and hitting go. And then closing out the next window that pops up, and then hitting plus, and then doing that again and again and again. If you've got 20, 30, 40, 50 projects to create, there's a more efficient way. So let's talk about a more efficient way that you can use today to do that. And that is by using a more automated project management technique. So how do we do this? You can navigate to the projects. We just did that a moment ago on that side sub-nav menu, or the top projects. Either way works. There is a download icon that shows up there that allows you to export the current list of all of your projects and all of their current settings, and paths for that matter. And then what you can do is when you download that, it sends you an email. You can update that data in an Excel file with any new projects that you want, and you can update information on existing projects. You can update dates. And then once you're done, you can turn around, save that file, and re-upload it, publishing it to the portal using the upload icon right next to the download icon. Ultimately, it's pretty much that simple. So let's use this technique to create just a couple of additional projects today. So what I'm going to do is in the portal, I'm already here on projects, or I could have just clicked projects in the left nav menu. It doesn't really matter. And just right here is the download button, little arrow pointing down to your computer, right? This is the export list of projects as an XLSX file. When I click this, it's going to send me an email. Now I've actually, let's just go and open this up real quick here. Yep, there it is. So I've already got this email, and I'm just going to be, and in fact, I got this one a little earlier. It only takes a few seconds, but I'm going to go ahead and click the click here to get the download list. And let's go ahead and download this file. It's on my other monitor here. And so if I go now to my downloads folder, refresh this, there we go. There is my Hive projects list, and it has my org ID that associates it to my system in the database here. I'm just going to open this file up in Excel, and what this will do is this will have a list of all of my project information here. Let's move this back down just a touch. There we go. And I'm going to maximize all of these fields. There we go. So you can see I've got a bunch of project numbers. I have a bunch of project names. Some of these have addresses. Some of them don't, and that's okay. Some of them have cities. Some don't. Some have states. Some don't. Doesn't really matter. Some of them have file paths. Some have nothing at all. And that's okay, right? If I wanted to, I could do some sorting and organizing of this. The export and way in which it exports isn't always in like a perfect order. It doesn't really matter. I should have in here someplace the 2020. I think I did a 2024 today, but I don't see it yet. That's fine. It might not be there, or I might have not put 24. That's entirely probable as well. Either way, within here, you can start adding whatever you would like. So if I said, let's create a 2024 0221-2, just going to take this and autofill it down a few to make a couple of projects, and we're going to have some project 1, and we'll do 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever we got here. So we've got some projects, and that's pretty much it. I've just made some project buckets, or will when I publish this back up. I will have made some project buckets. Now, if you have hard, fixed, localized paths on your system, you can absolutely use that. If you are using server-based paths, it's better to use the UNC-based path instead of the mapped drive letter path because that's what Revit reports back. Revit tends to not report the actual drive letter, even if you're opening up off of an internal like R drive or something, or a P drive. It tends to report the UNC path. You can see that here. So if you know what that is, you could put that in for these projects. I still personally tend to go to the unmapped paths and map them to projects as I see them come in. I find that to be the most consistent, especially when it's like an Autodesk Docs type environment here, or if it's a BIM 360 or ACC. Autodesk keeps changing how those paths work depending on what system you're in, so trying to predict it can be really frustrating. So I like to see the paths come in as project work happens, and then I organize them to the projects. But making new projects is as simple as this right here. So I'm simply going to save this, close it out. I've got that saved. Now when I jump back into the portal over here, I can publish those files right back in. In fact, let's go to where my downloads are because that's where this belongs. Downloads, there we go. And I can import that list of projects. It'll take it a second, but it'll ultimately import those projects quickly into the system. And ultimately, I should end up with, there they are. My projects are all imported, and it only took a few seconds for me to be able to do that, right? So I can do that quickly in Excel. If you have some routine that can extract project names and numbers out of something like Deltek Vision and dump them to a CSV, great, not a problem. So yeah, you can certainly go in there and work with those. Now in the future, if you wanted to rename your projects or renumber your projects, maybe you're just dumping in a quick couple of buckets, you can always come back and edit them here manually, or once again, you can download the current list, export the current list as an Excel file, rename them in that Excel file and republish it, and it'll be fine because in that Excel file, if I was to reopen that back up, there is a GUID to the far right over here. Don't touch this one. This project ID needs to stay exactly as it is. That's why I hit it to the far right. This needs to stay exactly as it is. This is what identifies your projects as something in our system. And when I publish these new projects here, if I pull this to the left, when I published these new projects, they didn't have a GUID, so it made a brand new one over here to the right for them. When I re-download the file, it will have those new GUIDs in the system. So just kind of keep that in mind. Be careful about editing this column. We need this here, but I don't want you to edit them. Can't lock the file, otherwise you can't edit it. So just be careful with that. Otherwise, you'll end up with new projects you perhaps weren't expecting. Okay, that's how you can do some automation. And we already talked a little bit about the verification of the association of those paths, right? You can go into the project and you can verify those. All right, but there's a couple of other things you can do. If you want to do that immediate verification I just mentioned, you can go into the project. You can verify the paths immediately. They will be displayed automatically once you do that association of paths. They will be displayed to those projects in the project's properties. That is 100% immediate. If you wanted to view them from the dashboard, that dashboard will refresh. It refreshes on approximately an hourly rate. So every hour it recaches information and gives you the information for the last 30 days up to, within an hour, right? So you can view that information there after the charts and the reporting tables have refreshed. And I want to demonstrate that because after you do this today, if you come back this afternoon a little bit later or you come back tomorrow, the data will be there. In our next session, we're going to talk even more about portal dashboards, but I'm just going to give you a quick little introduction to this over here on dashboard in projects. So I went to dashboard at the top. I went to the projects drawer. You can go to project summary right here. And in project summary, you'll probably see right now, if you're doing this as you're watching this, you'll probably only see the blank project, which will have some of your model data over there. After this refreshes, you'll see some of those paths associate to their appropriate project. So for example, I had just recently mapped in this session today, this path to this project right here, and it hasn't refreshed in the dashboard just yet. Hasn't been an hour since I've done that. So it hasn't yet refreshed. But when it does refresh, when I click on this project that I have, and your projects list might not be refreshed yet either, but when I click this project, that particular path for that other model instance for the EPP, not the MEP, but the EPP portion, that will show up here. It will be allocated to and associated with this logical project. All of its data records will be updated. Just hasn't refreshed yet on the dashboards. And then also, next time we have our part 3 in this series and we start going through these dashboards, if you stay on top of a little bit of this sort of project creation and some of this project path mapping to a logical project, these tables here will be nice and neatly organized. So you can see summaries of projects and information about the project as a whole and overall model performance and the detail and all kinds of other things that are going to be available and neatly grouped by project number in this environment after this has a chance to refresh. All right. So we'll be jumping into the questions and answers. I did see a few roll through that I don't think I was able to fully answer immediately, but first off, let's just quickly talk about where we are in this series. We've already talked about the installation and configuration of PAL. Today, we talked about the project and project model management. And in this next session, the one coming up in our part 3 here, we're going to be talking in depth about the portal dashboards that I just gave a little teaser on just a moment ago. And of course, the rest of the series here is still in front of us, and we're really excited about sharing with you some of those advanced things. The goal here is to make sure that you have access to all of this data and you know how to leverage it. So we're starting at the easy stuff, and we're going to build quick. Now, one thing I do want to let you know, those of you who are planning on going with us through the API portion of this in the next few sessions in the web API portions, I am going to strongly recommend that you start investigating right now Microsoft Power BI and a little bit about the Python programming language, because we're going to be using those very heavily. And the more you know about that now, the easier it's going to be when we get to those parts. So prep yourself ahead of time. Now, for those of you watching this on the web as a recording, I want to say thank you. We always appreciate when you take some time and do some self-learning and use our channel as a part of that. That's fantastic. We hope to earn your subscription through this series and all of our other content we have on the YouTubes.